Welcome back to Magic Hour Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Taylor Page.
And I'm Claire. Thank you so much for joining us.
It is another witchy episode. It is the Autumnal Equinox, aka Mabon, and I am so excited to get into all of the magic that this time of year. This is one of my favorite times of year. Like I come alive September, October, November, even December, but really November, October, September. Why did I say that backwards?
It's a witchy time of year. I mean, it's the witchiest time of year. So it makes sense that you feel so alive during this time.
I've been biding my time indoors, waiting for this moment. I remember actually in 2023, after Arthur Findlay College, my first day was September 3rd, I think. Yeah, because that's my mediumship anniversary. And Ari came and joined me in London when I was out of the college. And we coincidentally went to Stonehenge on the autumnal equinox. And we didn't realize like Stonehenge is literally built partially for tracking like the seasons and the equinoxes and the solstices. And there was like a huge party there and people like playing music. And I was like, wow, I couldn't have planned this any better. I just accidentally planned this for today, but I guess there are no accidents.
That's what I was going to say. There are no accidents. It makes perfect sense that you landed there exactly then.
I know. And it really just keeps coming back to this idea of magic happens when we get out of the way. The more we try to manufacture magic, the more like crunchy and frustrating it is. And the more we just follow our full heart yes from moment to moment, the more magic happens.
Yeah. And isn't that kind of like such a freeing thing? I think we have this idea that, we're all trying to control so much. And we're doing so much work to control the uncontrollable experience of life. And how freeing to know that actually we don't need to effort so much to control because A, we cannot control it. And B, it's like better if we can just be in flow with it. I mean, I'm saying this to me.
Yeah, well, it's a good reminder for everyone. And control and trust are inverse frequencies. And trust is what it takes to develop your intuition and magic and miracles. And control don't exist on the same frequency. When you just fully are in trust and release, that's when miracles can come in. But I wanted to share with the hummingbirds what we did for our Lamasse ritual, because I think it might also be a nice idea if you're working with a coven for Mabon/autumnal equinox. So we did a little ritual that I call a sunshine bag. And it was very much motivated by my conversation that I had with Lorraine Anderson, episode 227. I love that episode and I love her. So basically, what we did is everybody in the coven, after we did our usual sort of check in and visualization and meditation and card pulling, we all have these bags with little suns on them, and everybody in the coven had little sunshine paper. I love a good theme. I really went hard on the theme. And we all wrote like basically what we love about each other on these little slips of paper and put it in the other person's sunshine bag. And I think that it could be such a beautiful thing to do for this witchy time of the year and this check in point, which is what really every Sabbath and equinox and solstice is to, as we move into the part of the year where the light is waning and then we bring the sunshine with us into this darker part of the year and keep balance with that. So I thought that would be really relevant for this one too.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful idea. And we all got to write all these lovely things about each other and anonymously, except I accidentally wrote my name on some of them, but anonymously drop them into the bags. And then Taylor suggested, she told us basically afterwards that she's been picking one a day and trying to intuitively feel into who maybe wrote it. And so I did that last night before I went to bed and picked such a lovely message. And she kind of lifted up as we were doing it that often when we come together in witchy circles or just even with ourselves, we'll spend a lot of work like affirmations on ourselves or saying the things we love about ourselves. And it was nice to get to say those things about the other members of our coven and to receive those things from the other members instead of just like generating them for ourselves. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, it's so important to be in community. And we always feel like we have to be so self reliant and self sufficient and do everything for ourselves. And it's just nice to be able to lean on the people that you love too. And it's a gift for everybody involved. I've been pulling one a day before I sit in the power. And it's been like so beautiful. I actually pulled one of yours today, Claire, and it had your name signed on it. So that was one of them.
Could you tell it was me?
Yeah, I know your handwriting anyway.
Yeah.
Also, like when it comes to me, there is no anonymous. I know who wrote everything.
Okay.
Because I definitely am doing what I said, that little fun exercise of just intuiting. And everybody will feel it a different way. Like for me, the way I know who wrote it is my angels make me feel where they were sitting in relation to me in that day. It's really interesting how our psychic senses are all different. But yeah, I've been pulling it in the morning and then I like immediately my vibe gets raised, my energy gets raised because it's just such an uplifting thing. And then I go right into sitting in the power with that raised energy and like I can get in so much faster. And so this is also kind of a witchy biohack or spirit hack too, is if you do this exercise, you literally have a vibe booster bag right there, which raises your vibe to be a better bridge to spirit and angels and guides, like with minimal effort. So it's an instant hack for that too.
You know, it's funny, when you suggested this, it reminded me of something that my roommate and our friend Mandy did for me years ago, and she made a jar. She gave it to me as a gift, and she made a jar, and she filled it with all these pieces of paper of memories of ours or inside jokes or uplifting things. It was kind of there. It was like whenever you feel sad, you can pull from this jar, and I still have it, and I pull from it, whenever I'm feeling low, but yeah, it's just like such a beautiful thing to create for yourself, whether you do it with a coven or just even for yourself, like reminders of how beautiful and amazing you are. And then to raise your vibe like that, there's just no way it doesn't affect you to read those words.
Absolutely. And I think it'd be even so amazing if you have one of those big jars that, like, every year on your birthday, people write new things and put it in. It's like it can be an ever evolving thing.
That's such a good idea.
Yeah. I love writing those little things. So just give me a jar and I'll put some in.
Okay, great. Get ready.
But I'm so excited to get into this conversation with Sarah, the Woodland Witch, today. It was such a delightful conversation. And I just love how every single witch has their own niche and their own vibe and their own energy that they bring to the conversation, and how we're 70 plus episodes into this podcast. And we've had so many different witches on the pod to talk about different things, and everybody really has their own shtick, and I love it. It just makes me really happy, and this conversation is no different. I'm constantly excited to see all the ways that witchcraft can translate into everyday life, and it always has a different flavor. Sarah is a folk practitioner and cottage witch residing in New England on her small homestead with her husband and little witchling. Her crafting is centered around cultivating magic in the mundane, which led her to open her very own online apothecary, Folk Craft and Flora. You can find her popular Instagram account, The Woodland Witch, with 2 H's. Welcome, welcome, Sarah. Sarah, welcome to Magic Hour. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So it's really funny because as I was looking for a guest for this autumnal equinox episode, I saw that you call yourself a house witch. And I'm actually reading a book or listening to a book on tape called The House Witch right now. And I was like, that's a really funny synchronicity.
Yeah, that's so funny.
So we always start the episode by asking, what is your big 3, your sun, moon, and rising?
My big 3. Okay, so I am a Taurus sun, a Libra rising, and a Capricorn moon.
You know what? That's so funny because when we just did our little breathing exercise before we hit record, I saw the Libra symbol around you and I was like, I bet she has prominent Libra energy and your Instagram is so beautiful. I was like, I really see that. Lots of Venusian vibes.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So the second question that I like to ask is, how does your intuition speak to you?
So for me, intuition, it's interesting because I grew up in a really religious household. So I feel like I had a lot of intuitive nudges when I was younger that were pushed down. So I spent a lot of time like really trying to relearn, and even now still relearning how intuition shows up for me. And for me, I feel like it's something that I just hear in the back of my mind. Like, it's something that correlates between my head and like my gut, if that makes sense. Like, if I just have this feeling and I'll have a thought that lines up with that feeling. Does that make sense?
It does. It feels like an interesting mix of hearing, feeling, and knowing.
Yes. It's just like this deep sense. And it's something I had to learn to like differentiate between, okay, am I just having an anxious thought? Am I feeling just unsettled in some way? And that's something you have to pay attention to.
Yes, absolutely. And fear and versus intuition is such a hot topic and one that really takes a lifetime to detangle.
Absolutely. I think you're always like fine tuning it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I like to say too that whenever it's fear, it has this subtext of what if? And whenever it's intuition, it's always grounded, solution oriented, present moment, how to move forward here and now. So I think that's like a helpful way to distinguish it. Like intuition will never make you feel anxious as it's coming in, even if then once you sit with the message, it brings up anxiety. The way it comes in will never bring up anxiety.
I agree.
So I'm really curious to hear more about your backgrounds. I always like to, on these solstice and equinox episodes, I like to ask our witchy guests, what is your witchy origin story coming from that religious background? Like, how did you find your way to the path?
Yeah, I grew up really religious when I was young. I want to say up until about age 6, we were Catholic. I did like CCD school and all of that. My siblings did. They all had communions and I had a christening when I was born, like the whole nine. I was at that point, I was around 6 years old. My parents shifted into like full modern Christianity. And it was really intense. It was like, okay, we're not celebrating Halloween anymore. The Easter Bunny's not real. Santa's not real. We can't watch this TV show. We can't listen to this song anymore. It just became very insanely structured really fast. And I don't want to speak like badly about growing up necessarily in the church because like I had a lot of friends. It wasn't like anything super like, I mean, I don't want to say like traumatizing, but it wasn't anything bad. Like nothing really bad happened. It was just very strict. And so I continued to stay in the church until I want to say I was about 17 or 18. Eventually, when my parents moved to Florida to take care of my grandparents who were sick, they didn't really find a church that they felt was like home that compared to the one that we had been going to when we lived in Connecticut. And so I just kind of bounced around between different places if I had friends who went to a certain church or whatever. And when I was 18, my mom moved to Pennsylvania and I moved and lived with her for a year and then I came back to Florida. And I ended up going to church with my sister. It was a church my family had tried in the past, but we just didn't like my mom didn't vibe with it, so we didn't stay there. And my sister ended up getting married to someone in that church, and that's actually where I met my husband now. Once we got married, I think is when we both started questioning some things. Like the church that we had been going to, some stuff was coming to light, just like corrupt, like nasty stuff. And it just made us really question, do we really subscribe to this or are we just here because this is how we were raised? You know what I mean? So him and I got married. We decided, obviously we got married very young. I was only 20 and he was 22. So we were very, very young, but that's what you did in the church. You got married very young. You couldn't live together before you were married. So we ended up one day just being like, let's just go start a life just like on our own ourselves. So we moved to North Carolina and we lived there for almost 6 years. And while we were living there, I just feel like we both had this, we started struggling in our marriage because we had both gotten married so young and we were both on this self discovery journey. Like we pretty much grew together. And so we're now figuring out who we are as individual people. And so we began kind of struggling in our relationship. And sometime later, just to fast forward a little bit, I started working at a haunted attraction doing special effects makeup.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was fun. I miss it. But so at this time, I'm working there. We're kind of going through really hard times. I felt like I like to explain that time. I mean, we both were, but I was very selfish at that time in my life. I think because everything was so structured for so long, I was like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And that doesn't correlate necessarily in a partnership all the time. And it just became, I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. I was getting in trouble. I was drinking a lot. And I was just in a really, really bad place at this time. It eventually led to my husband and I separating. And we were not living together. And it just seemed like it was just not going to work. It was the first time I was like really alone for the first time in my life. I lived by myself and I was forced to have this moment of just, okay, who are you? Who do you want to be? Because you don't want to continue being this person with this crowd that you've associated yourself with. Your marriage is failing. Like, you identified as being a wife for so long. That was what you clung to. So it was just all these things where I'm just like, oh my God, I'm failing at life. Like, I am failing. And so I was working at this haunted attraction at the time. I actually ended up connecting with a woman. Her name was Janet. We miss Janet. She was a Wiccan, and I don't identify as a Wiccan, but she had a very like nature-based spirituality. And so I was like, wow, people like really believe in that sort of stuff. And I feel like everything she said was so in line with things that I believed already, that I had just no label for, if that makes sense. And like I said, when I was younger, I had a lot of intuitive nudges, a lot of like inner knowing and saying things. And my mom was like, how do you know about that type of thing? And that was all very much pushed down and like pushed away. But at this time, I'm connecting these dots and I'm like, wow, like I'm really interested in this. So I just continued to talk to her and I continued to connect with her. And I bought my first tarot deck and I was really afraid to use it because I still had all this like religious trauma, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go to hell or something. And I had this one night, like I said, feel like I'm failing at life. I had this pivotal moment where I was just like belly sobbing breakdown on my living room floor. Like I was just like, I don't know what to do anymore. And I had eyeballed that tarot deck as this was happening. And I was like, I'm just going to grab it. And I grabbed it. I don't know what pulled me to just grab it. And I shuffled. Obviously, at this time, I had no knowledge of tarot or anything like that. And I just dumped all the cards out and I like spread them across my floor. And I picked one up and it was the Tower. And of course, at the time, I had no idea like what it really meant. But I looked and it was like, okay, extreme inevitable change. Like, this is a turning point for you. And so after that, I had also started like posting on TikTok and things like that and connecting with the witchy community. And I was like, I'm going to dive into this and see where it takes me because this feels like something that I explained it as like a feeling of coming home. Like it feels like I'm finding myself. And that's kind of how it all began. And I dove into it. I started being really intentional with my days, just basic carrying crystals around, speaking intentions into my morning beverages, things like that. And once I started healing and finding that path for myself, it was just a trickle effect with everything in my life that just started to improve. My husband and I worked things out. We're together now. We have a beautiful daughter. Like, it's just crazy how it works out like that. But that was the starting point for me.
Wow, what a beautiful story. And I know a lot of people are going to relate to that. A big focus of my work is healing the witch wound. And because of that, I attract a lot of people to this space who have similar religious trauma and superstition and things like that from their background. And I think that it's really interesting going back to astrology. Like our rising sign is how we feel we have to show up in childhood in a lot of ways. So you have that Libra, keep it balanced, be the mediator, do what everyone else wants me to do, be a wife, be in partnership, not knowing who you were on your own. And so then our descendant sign, the seventh house ruler, is how we show up in marriage and partnerships. And when that is out of balance or not healthy, then the Aries on the descendant can be like that selfish, impulsive, reckless person that you were describing, because the Libra wasn't
I didn't know
healthy
that
to
about the
begin with.
descendant too. Not like really.
Yeah. So when you're a Libra rising, you're like so harmonious with everyone out in the world, but then at home, it's like, I'm the boss, baby, because it's that Aries on the other side. And it's very similar with any rising sign, is the opposite sign is the ruler of marriage and partnerships and how you are at home in partnership, because astrology is all about the polarities and the balances, and what we don't get in one area of life, we get in another area of life. So I just found that to be very synchronistic with your story. And
It really is.
yeah, I also really loved the part when you were like, it just felt like coming home, because in many ways, these like Abrahamic religions and everything, we have a whole host of ancestors pre that programming and conditioning who were nature based, who were polytheistic, who were goddess based, who were like all connected to the land and the seasons. And so I think that we've all strayed so far from like our birthright of connection to speaking the earth's language and spirit's language, and fear has just become so rampant, and it's so sad. And I've been seeing, like, in particular, an interesting wave of people who started out Christian or in some sort of like dogmatic religious practice. And then they move to experimenting with spirituality, but from an unhealed place. And they're like, okay, I'm going to manifest everything I want, and I'm going to do this, do that, without ever looking at the shadows. And then they get spooked and they've been going back to Christianity. And I've been like noticing some people in this place. And then they're like, Jesus is the only way. Spirituality is all a hoax. Like, I never got my needs. I was just lost. But in reality, they were just bypassing the deeper, true spiritual practices.
Or they apply like those rules in that sort of system to the spirituality that they're partaking in. And so it's like, for example, like working with deities, like treating these individual deities with different characteristics and different personalities the way that they would, you know, God or Jesus or something like that, and feeling like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble. It's like applying those similar thoughts and feelings to the spirituality that they're taking on.
Yeah, it's all very interesting, because I feel like if you feel lost and disconnected, then you're not doing spirituality right in some way. It's all about going inward and looking at yourself and reclaiming your power and connecting to the earth and connecting to the benevolent forces that are guiding you. And if you feel like scared, superstitious, lost, or whatever is coming up, then it just shows there's deeper shadow work to be done there. So I really agree with what you're saying of taking that past belief system and projecting it onto spirituality, and then being like, actually, this doesn't feel safe to my nervous system, so I'm going back to what feels safe. And of course, like, no shade if you're a Christian, and you could even be a Christian witch, and you could be practicing Christianity in a healthy way. I'm talking about the superstitious, fear-based, trauma-inducing sect of Christianity.
I tell people all the time, because people will be like, oh, Jesus loves you. And I'm like, Jesus and I are good. Like, we're good.
Yeah, and Jesus was like a mystic too.
Absolutely. I'm like, I think we're fine.
Exactly. I love that. So when this episode comes out, it'll be the autumnal equinox. So I'm wondering if you can just speak to our community a bit about this time of year, the energetic signature of this equinox, and just starting there of like what I call the temperature check for this part of the wheel of the year.
Yeah, so the autumn equinox has everything to do. It's like the final harvest. So, you know, we're kind of getting ready to transition into the darker half of the year. It's all about abundance. It's also a time where liminality is really present, and that veil between spirit and like our realm is very thin. So it's a time where we connect a lot with our ancestors, our loved ones who have passed on. I also think of this time of year as like a shedding of layers. It's just as the leaves are falling, we're kind of shedding as well and getting ready to push into that hibernation, so to speak, that time of year. Yeah, it's just a time for transformation, connection, celebrating abundance. It's my favorite time.
Honestly, same. This is one of my favorite times too. And so, with that sense of kind of transition, and I know balance is one of the big keywords too, because it always falls on the first day of Libra season. It's the point of the year where there's exactly equal light and dark. And I find that it's a really good time to just be reflective and to tune in and be like, where do I feel out of balance? Where do I need to change? Where do I need to shift things, including, I think, the stories we're telling ourselves about what's possible, about what we need. Like, we're constantly transforming and growing and changing. And I think the solstices and equinoxes are really great check in points to be like reflective and being like, am I telling myself a story that's still true? Am I still getting my needs met? Have my needs shifted? So I think like the equal parts light and dark is a really important part too.
Absolutely, because as you're pushing into that darker half of the year too, it is a time to really go inward, become reflective, and really be connected with yourself because the earth kind of quiets down as well at that time. So it's just a time to really go inward and connect back to yourself.
Yeah. And the equinoxes also feel like times that are kind of brimming with potential because of the equal parts light and dark, where like summer solstice is like light, 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 winter solstice is like dark, dark, dark. And then the autumnal and spring equinoxes are these times where it's like anything's possible, like equal parts light and dark. It kind of reminds me of when if the winter solstice is nighttime and the summer solstice is daytime, and then those liminal sunrise, sunset
Yeah,
places.
in between moments.
Exactly. Like the spring equinox is like the sunrise, and the autumnal equinox is like the sunset. And that's always a time when the veil is extra thin and magic is possible. It's part of the reason I named this podcast Magic Hour. It's not just that we're discussing magic, but it's also that like golden hour sunset type of play time where it just feels like the veil is thin and magic is possible. So I feel like the equinoxes are extra portal like in their energy, that sort of anything is possible and it's a very transitional moment.
I agree. Absolutely.
And so what would you suggest for some rituals around this time? What's a good practice?
Yeah. So this time, it's always like important for me to practice gratitude at this time as well because I'm like a big gardener. I spend a lot of time outside. So I do practice a lot of gratitude. Specifically, I have a gratitude journal. So making sure that I'm filling out that. I also like in the fall, I think we all do a lot of good smells, good vibes. And so I do simmer pots a lot around this time of year. A lot of cinnamon, pumpkin, apple, and those are all really good things for protection, abundance, things like that. So just incorporating those elements of the season into my home.
And can you explain to our audience what a simmer pot is for those that don't know?
Yeah, so a simmer pot is essentially a stovetop potpourri, but the witchy community likes to add a little boost to that and utilize those ingredients for more intentional purposes. So it's pretty much combining herbs, fruits, flowers, anything that might connect to the intention you're trying to set, setting it in a pot of water, letting it simmer on the stove, letting that energy radiate through your space and connecting to it, connecting to the spirits of those ingredients and calling that intention forth.
I love that so much. And so, can you just say again, what are some good things to add to the simmer pot for this portion of the wheel of the year?
Yeah, so for autumn, obviously apples, pumpkins, cinnamon, spiced things are really popular. Apples, when you cut them, there is a pentagram inside, so it's really good for protection. They're also really good for gratitude as well. They're associated with abundance as well because they're very abundant at that time of year. Pumpkins are really good for grounding. They're low to the ground, so it's good to connect to that energy of being grounded. And cinnamon is good for prosperity, abundance, all of those things. And it radiates a really nice smell and adds a little magic to your home.
I love that so much. And spoken like a true Taurus, I'm married to a Taurus, and he's always like, can you do something in the kitchen to make it smell good? So I think like scent is underrated as one of our senses. Like we focus so much on the other senses, but scent has this ability to bring us into a different, it transforms us, it takes us back to a memory. Like it's so powerful. And I think using it in our witchcraft is really underutilized.
It is like, I feel like the sense that I really appreciate the most because, like you said, it brings me, I can smell something and be like, I smelled that in 1998. Like that reminds me of being at my aunt's house and that's this time, or like something like that. Like it can really transport you to a different time and really set the mood for a space. Like yesterday, I just did like a whole cleansing on the house and I used pine salt because it's got lemon in it, really good for cleansing, like purification of the home. And I came home and I was like, it smells so good in here. And it just gives you this like comfort.
Yeah, I think even in mediumship work, if you can get the scent of somebody who's passed over and put that scent, spray it on your altar, or when you're meditating and wanting to connect with them, spraying that scent, like that can transform you and connect you so, so deeply. So don't sleep on scent as a magical thing in your toolbox. So I love that. What else? What else do you do personally for this equinox and your magical practice?
Yeah, so obviously, as we talked earlier, this is a really big time where people are connecting to spirits that have passed on. So I like to set up sort of like an ancestor altar, and I have one all the time because both of my parents have now passed. So I have an ancestor altar that I tend to all the time. It's next to my working altar. But I like to move that to the center of my home. So I will take their pictures, candles, things that belong to them, and I set it on my dining room table. And I leave it there for usually like a month, like the whole month of October, I'll leave it. And I just tend to it and I try to connect with them. So I think it's a good way to just try to honor their spirits and connect to them a little more during this time of year. And moving it to somewhere like the middle of the home just gives, it's like a welcome. You know what I mean? Like, welcome. Come hang out here, spend time with me, connect with me type of thing.
I love that. And it's basically the month leading up before Samhain as well. So we really are shifting towards that. And I'm really sorry to hear that both of your parents are passed over. That's so hard. And I love how you honor them. And I'm wondering how they, with their Christian background, did they accept your witchcraft journey?
Yeah, so my dad passed away when I was 14, so he was not around at the time. But my mom, I actually hid it from her for a while. I want to say almost 2 years. I didn't tell her. And then we moved up here to New Hampshire after I had my daughter. And I don't know what possessed me to, but one day I was on the phone with her and I was like, Mom, I gotta tell you something. And I just came out and told her. And she was so accepting of it. She was like, I kind of figured. And I was like, why? And she's like, you've always kind of been that way. And then fast forward down the line, after she passed away, she was adopted and asked me to reconnect with her birth mother because she just was never in a place to really mend and heal that relationship. But it turns out that my grandmother is a practicing witch as well. Like, long story short, I had always, ancestry is really important to me. So I was building family trees and I didn't really know much about my mom's birth family. She did reconnect with them. And I remember like her biological father's side of the family being in our lives for a short period of time and like giving us Christmas gifts and stuff. So I knew they were around, but there was something her and her mom like just didn't really, I don't know. I don't know what happened. I think my mom just had a lot of abandonment issues from her adoption and things like that. So we just didn't connect with her. And every time I would ask about her, she just would brush it off and be like, give me basic answers, basically. And she had cancer. So when she was nearing the end, we had moved her up here living with my sister. She began giving us things to just kind of divvy out her belongings. There was things she wanted specifically given to specific kids. And she said, when you go to clear my house back in Pennsylvania, there's a red chest in my bedroom sitting there for you. And I said, okay. She said, everything you've wanted to know about your grandmother is in that chest. She's like, make sure your siblings don't take it. She's like, it's for you. It gives me chills, like, thinking about
Me
it.
too. I have full chills right now.
She, like, really just knew the perfect moment, the perfect time that she wanted me to have that. So after we got through everything, the funeral, we went and got through all her things and cleared out the house and everything. I brought that chest home and I opened it and everything was in there. There was hundreds of letters between her and her mom. And my grandmother was an English major, so she was a big into writing poetry. So a lot of her written works were in there. And I remember reading these letters, and I only had the ones from my grandmother, obviously, because my mom didn't hold on to the ones she sent. But as I'm reading them, I'm reading all this stuff about her coming out to my mom and telling her that she's a witch. And this is what her practice is like. This is what she does. And there was actually the final letter that they had between the two of them was a tarot reading that my grandmother had done for my mom. And she like wrote it all out on paper and sent it to her. And so it was just crazy. There was a bunch of other stuff in there, but I spent like a month trying to track my grandmother down. And I had one more place. It was an apartment complex, and I saw her name like maybe listed as to living there at one point in time. So I called them and I was like, "Hey, I know you can't really tell me if she's here, but I have a message for her. If you know if she's there, can you please just give her my phone number?" And within a couple of days, she called me, and I told her what happened. And I ended up actually last October, actually right around the autumn equinox, it was October. So I went and I met with her and I got to visit with her. And she's older now, but she's not like super deep into her craft as much as she used to be. But she gave me her first tarot deck, her book of shadows, and like a family quilt that my great grandmother had cut clothing from all family members just in our lineage and sewed them together, and it's not finished. And she was like, "I know you love to sew and you do all of this. Can you finish it for me?" And so she was like, "I want you to have it and add your own family's clothing to it and finish it and keep it and pass it down." And so it was just like this crazy connection. And I think going back to me telling my mom, like it wasn't a surprise for her. She was like, "You remind me of her a lot." So she kind of had that nudge, and she, sorry, I'm getting like chills about it. She just knew every time I asked her, I don't know how to explain this, what she thought about it. She would say, "I know where your heart is." She's like, "You're not an evil person. You're not doing evil things." She was like, "I don't see anything wrong with what you're doing and what you believe in." And I think it opened her mind a lot too with certain things. And she became comfortable with the tarot and stuff like that, like taking time to really understand what it is instead of just chalking it up to this is a no-no in the Bible, this is a no-no in the church, like kind of a thing, which is totally opposite to how it was when I was a kid. It was very much like da 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 da, we're not doing this, listening to this, watching that. So I'm really glad that I had that with her before she did get sick, because I do feel like she's with me now.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And that is like also so crazy how, I mean, first of all, it's just an incredible story. But secondly, it's so crazy how you having the bravery to tell your mom about your practice is also what maybe solidified for your mom that you had to be the one to connect with your grandma. Like it put that into place as well.
Right. She knew, like, I don't know, it is really crazy because there was such a aspect of ancestral healing that happened, because like I said, my mom had all these feelings about her adoption and was like, "Why didn't they want me?" Which I think a lot of adoptees experience. And it just so happens that like when I did meet with my grandmother, she was featured in a book. This artist had an exhibit and they wrote a book about women who had given their children up for adoption in the times before like Roe v. Wade. She her story ended up getting picked for this book, and I have it. She gave it to me, and she tells her entire story of finding out she was only, I want to say she was 14 or 15 when she got pregnant by a much older man. He was like 21, 22. And so my great grandmother, who was in our lives a lot, this would be my biological grandfather's father's mother. She basically was like, "We'll help you and we'll take care of you, but you have to marry him." And she was like, "I'm not marrying him." And so her mother was like, "Okay, we'll do adoption." And so she got involved with these, they're like schools almost. Like you get sent away and it's run by like nuns in a church and things like that. And the baby, once you have the baby, they come and they take it. And my grandmother had finally like given birth and she changed her mind. She didn't want to give my mom up. And the social worker picked her up at this place and her mom was in the car and she said, I don't want to go through with this. Like I want to keep her. And basically the social worker was like, well, do you have the money to pay for this entire thing? Because the state had paid for it if you did the adoption, or the adopted family would pay for it. And she was like, no, I don't. So essentially she literally just couldn't pay for it. And so it was this big thing where she was like, I wanted her. Like I did want her. And so it just felt like this healing moment. Like even I know my mom knows now, but it's like, okay, she carried this weight of abandonment and I wasn't wanted, but she was like, no, I did want her.
And how wild from your grandma's perspective to like have this experience, for her to be a practicing witch and for that magic to still exist in her lineage and find like reconnect her through her magic. Like that's actually insane.
I remember like it happening and I was like, is this like a movie? Is this really happening? Like never in a million years did I ever think that my grandmother would be like a practicing witch and I was going to reconnect with her and have her supplies here. Like I just was so mind blown and my husband was like, this is actually insane. I'm like, it's crazy.
Like attracts like. The magic will always find a way back to itself. So that's so powerful. Switching back to autumnal equinox.
We really did get off track. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. But I just want to talk about too, for anybody that wants to like do some spell work or create their own altar, like what are some of the correspondences for this season?
So correspondences, like we talked about, was apples, pumpkins. I think when it comes to, it is a little personal because when you are doing something like an ancestor altar, it is going to be very individual to those you are honoring. As far as like giving offerings and things to them, soul cakes are really, really popular this time of year. A popular recipe to give to those who have passed on to nourish them. They can pull the energy from that. But like I said, just having belongings, things that can tether them in connection to you, pictures of them, keeping their spirit alive. If you want to do just like more of a seasonal type of altar, I always go back to being outdoors. Like I would grab, I'm such a crafty person too. So like crafting with the dried leaves, drying out apples, pumpkin seeds. I like to do this like little pumpkin seed wishing spell. Like if you find seeds that are big enough, you can pretty much write on it and do a little manifestation like you would with a bay leaf. So yeah, things like that.
So, can you just go a little bit more in depth with that pumpkin seed manifestation spell, like for people that aren't familiar?
So this is my first year growing pumpkins. I'm actually really excited, but usually every year when we're like, we carve pumpkins with my daughter. So I will keep all of the seeds. And if I find some that are big enough, I will take Sharpie, and usually you might not be able to fit like a full word on it, but let's say you're trying to call in more financial abundance, just like a little money sign. And then I place it in like in a cauldron and I light a candle with it and just let it burn. And if I have like any prosperity oil or anything like that, and sometimes I do multiple seeds. So like I'll just have a candle going and I'll put the seeds in to connect to that spirit and energy of abundance and with the pumpkins, but also having that candle for the fire element to put that energy out there. And yeah, I just let that sit until it's burned down.
I love that. And so I want to go a little bit into your home witchcraft practice because I think that this is so like cozy, and this is the time of year where we're starting to prepare to go into this more yin space where we're more internal and in the home. And so what kind of thematic things as a home witch are you doing at this time of year?
So at this time of year, like I said, we're moving into that transitional time. I am very focused on making my home super comforting because we get a lot of snow here, so we're inside a lot. So I am being very intentional with my space, how I decorate, the smells that I'm radiating into the space, cleaning, keeping the energy zen, and just bringing the element of that grounding gratitude into my home. I'm cooking and I'm baking a lot more usually around that time of year. So infusing intention into whatever it is I'm cooking and I'm baking, sharing that with my family. I also really like to give back at this time of year. It is a time of gratitude, but like even if it's simple, like sharing eggs, we have chickens. So like sharing eggs with my neighbor, like making sure that I'm honoring that balance that we were talking about of give and take and celebrating the harvest and sharing it as well.
I love that. Yeah, it's like sometimes we can become so individualistic with our spiritual practices where it's like we interpret the light and dark as just how it relates to our own inner experience. But I really like what you're saying about no, it's not just balancing me within me, it's balancing all of my gratitude and manifestations with how I can be of service to others. And I think that's such an important missing component of a lot of modern day spiritual spaces.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So, actually, I want to rewind back to what you were saying about soul cakes. Can you tell us about what those are in a little bit more depth?
Yeah, let me actually see if I can real quick just get a recipe so I can kind of go in depth.
I want you to also speak to us a little bit more about that kitchen witchcraft element of speaking intentions into the dough or how you infuse your baking practice with your spiritual practice.
Yeah, okay, so soul cakes are, just to get this specific because I don't want to miss anything. It's a small round cake with sweet spices. It resembles like a shortbread, which is very true. But it's traditional to create them on, or to bake them on All Hallows Eve and gift them as offering to the spirits. To the kitchen element, how I'm speaking intention, I am an animist. So I believe that all things have a spirit essence. So when I'm working with ingredients in my kitchen or spices or plants or herbs or anything like that, I'm not just like throwing them in there with a thought. I'm cultivating relationship with it. I'm getting to know it. I'm connecting with it on a deeper level. I'm asking permission. I think that's a big thing in this day and age, especially in a spiritual practice. Not even just a spiritual practice, just in the world. Like people look at the world and they're like, this is for me to take. And it's really important to me to not be like that. So when I am foraging or grabbing herbs or anything like that, I am talking to them. I'm asking permission before I take. And sometimes the answer is no. So that's how I work within kitchen witchcraft too, is cultivating, asking, working that relationship. And I think the act of crafting as well, just like meditating and deepening that intention as you're crafting it, is really imbuing your magic into it, whatever it is you're making.
Yeah, so kind of just like with any spell, it's all about the intention that you're setting at the top and then infusing that into the process as you go too.
Absolutely. And then even after, like sitting on it, like if you were infusing a hot cup of apple cider with protection, like really as you're sipping, like sitting and meditating as you're enjoying it as well.
Yeah, and that's I think like the visualization intention part is so important in our spa work too. Like just having a bunch of ingredients and following a list, but not being really connected in the visualization, the meditation, the intention. It's definitely not going to be as powerful or, take off the way that you want it to if you're not connected to that part of it.
Right. You really need that energetic exchange in some way.
hmm And so I saw on your social media that you love to sew and that you do like you sometimes stitch like spells and intentions and weave things in through your sewing practice. And I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I really love, I love sewing witchcraft. I've been sewing since 2019, 2018, 2018. I sewed masks for people all throughout the pandemic. It's just a way that helps me to connect to ancestral traditions. Like textile arts is like was such a huge technological advancement, and it's been done for so long. So it helps me connect in that way to just being more grounded in tradition, but it also allows me to like literally stitch intention. It's the act of repetitive motions. It's also something that can at times, depending on what form of textile art you're working on, to be very tedious and slow. And so it forces you to have this moment of slowing down and really being intentional with what you're doing, which is why I love it, because usually we can put a spell together like that, burn a candle down, whatever. But with something like that, there's so much energy and effort that goes into what you're making that it just really pushes your intention into that item and takes a lot of time. So it's just a lot of energy that gets pushed into it when you are in such a tedious process and being forced to really slow down, meditate on it, put all this effort and work into it to create whatever it is you're making.
That's such a good point that we're in this day and age that's so all about instant gratification, and we can sometimes put that consciousness into our spell work too. So it's very Taurus and Capricorn of you to be like, slow down, work towards an end goal, like come back to stillness. And it reminds me, I think it's in the Mists of Avalon books, but I can't remember because I read so many books. But it was this like people would be at the loom and it would take forever and they'd be weaving and and there was a character who would go into trance like states because of that, where it's just that repetitive motion.
It's very repetitive. It's interesting too, because most of the things you're talking about, the loom, a lot of things like that, even when you're spinning fabric, like it's such a process, and it's an act of transformation as well, because you're taking this wool, spinning the fabric, it's getting turned into yarn, you're, creating fabric and other textiles with it. It's just such a process, but it allows you to be really intentional.
And I feel like for people that might have a hard time meditating or turning off that part of their brain that's like, I have to be productive, I have to be productive. This is kind of like the perfect marriage of that, where it's like you are being productive, you are doing something, but in a meditative way. And so once you have the finished product that you've poured this intention, this visualization into, what do you do with that then?
So it just depends on what it is you're making. I have something right here. So I made these recently. This is a little sachet pillow. It's filled with lavender. So this I specifically crafted for the energy of calming and bringing peace. So I keep it under my pillow, but also to add the scent element to it. When you smell it, it gives you that aspect of aromatherapy to help you feel physically calm and comforted. So that's just something I did recently, but you can really do anything. Sewing sigils into clothing is a really good one to have that energy radiate, and you're wearing it around. So it's like that energy is completely surrounding you. The quilt that I'm going to finish someday, that adds like a connection to ancestry. So there's really, I mean, you could do literally anything. Poppets are really good for like sympathetic magic, for creating energy that you want to affect someone else, or a pet, a family member, yourself, anything like that. Filling it with ingredients with specific intention.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit more about what a poppet is?
Yeah, so it's essentially, it can be shaped like a person. I think that's like standard. It's a form of sympathetic magic, which is magic that is used to have a direct effect on its target or whoever it is. Puppets can be used for baneful work, but I don't really bother with that. I like to do them more for like abundance or even healing. I think a couple years ago I did a puppet. It was shaped like a heart, and it was similar to like a fabric pillow like this, but I wrote a letter to myself for healing, and I filled it with healing herbs, and I stitched it up, and I kept it on my altar space where I could see it every day. And it was just a form of pulling healing energy to myself. Sometimes I would hold it and I would meditate with it, things like that.
I love that. And I got a message while you were talking about like the weaving, the quilting, the stitching, that those practices also unlock ancestral memory and connection within us too. Like when we find things that slow us down and bring us into the same states that our ancestors would have been in, it unlocks something deeper within us that's like a stored memory that in today's pace and technology and day and age and distractions, it's harder to access those places. And we might, I feel like a lot of us, we watch these like period pieces or we're really into cottagecore, and there's just this deeper sense of longing that we feel. And I think by doing these like slow, screen free, meditative practices that our ancestors would have done, it connects us to that yearning place of like ancestral memory within and really fills up the cup of that within us.
I totally agree with that.
So I think that's so powerful. And whenever I have a witch on the podcast, I always like to ask this question. Are you comfortable maybe sharing a story of a time where you cast a spell and it was just like extra magical, or the fruits of whatever spell you did really paid off in a magical way? Like, I always like to expand the audience's mind on what's possible when it comes to magic.
Yeah, so one spell that's coming to mind, it's actually just funny. One spell that's coming to mind is the spell that I did to move up here to New Hampshire. My husband was more than against it. He was like, we're absolutely not moving to New Hampshire, because while we were separated, he had bought a home. So he was like, we own this home. I'm not moving. Like, you're crazy. And I manifested it every single day. I was burning bay leaves every day. I was burning candles down every day because I had just had my daughter and she was almost 6 months old. And I felt, obviously we like left to be on our own and do our own thing. But at this time, like, I had a baby. I was like, I want to be near my family. I want my daughter to grow up in the nostalgic way I did of being around her cousins and things like that. And we were so isolated, and all of my friends were just at totally different stages of life. And I had her when I was 26. So I was like, I want to move to New Hampshire. I want to go back. I'm from New England. I was born here. I want to go back. I want her to have that New England childhood. I remember it just being so great. And like really positive points of my life was being up here, especially with all 4 seasons and everything. So I was speaking it out there every single day. I want to say it was about a month I had been doing this, and my husband was working remote at the time because of COVID, and his job was based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we lived near Asheville. So it was like a 2.5 hour almost drive. And all of a sudden, he gets a call from his boss and he's like, everybody's got to come back to office. And he was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't be driving 2.5 hours to work. He's like, I'm gonna lose my job. And of course, I'm kind of freaking out at this point, because when you manifest things like that, that's why you have to be so intentional with how you want it to happen. Because I was sitting there like, well, I didn't want him to lose his job. I didn't want that. But he ended up like being really scared, and he started applying places, and he just wasn't getting any jobs in the area. And my sister sent me, she lives here, she sent me a job, a link to a job, and I shared it with him, and he's like, I really don't want to move there. And I was like, okay, like, I'm not gonna force anything. And then within a week, he started like looking at what home prices were and what they were selling for. And he was like, I actually think we could get like a really decent profit off of this home. And so once he got that idea in his head, like, I'm telling you, we moved a month and a half later after that. And we moved up here, and I was like, okay. Like, it was just crazy how quickly it all happened. And just every circumstance that led up to it was just like, wow, this is really happening.
Even the fact that he didn't land any jobs in the area, like the energy was just so close to him with that. So I think that is such a powerful story and a really important point when you were like, I didn't mean for him to lose his job. Like, not like this. It is important to like stay intentional, to insert these caveats of like for the highest good of all, or something even better than I could imagine for myself. Like, saying that is really good, but at the same time, it did all work out for the best.
It did, yeah. And I like, sometimes I think too, those things happen. I'm not someone who's like, everything happens for a reason, because sometimes things just happen and sometimes things just suck. But it was something where the universe was like, we got to move a few things around first, but we'll get you to that end goal here. And we've been here for 3 years.
Wow. I love that story. That's so awesome. Sarah, where can the audience find you and connect with you and all of the things?
So I am on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Yeah, YouTube. I'm like, where am I? I also have an online apothecary. It is called Folkcraft and Flora Apothecary. I take that cottage crafting, herbalism, put that into magical goods for other people. I have an Instagram page for that too, and that is on my standard Instagram page. So you'll be able to find it there. And yeah. that's where I am.
Awesome. Well, I've loved getting to chat with you today. Thank you for sharing your stories with us and your magical practices. It's just been such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it as well.
Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit, my loves, the part of the podcast where I sit with our angels, our guides, our loved ones in the spirit world, and give the messages for the collective. As always, take what resonates with you, leave the rest. So, the first message that I want to give today is something that came through to me as I was sitting in the power earlier with my own guides. And it was this really simple but important message that when it's the right time for something, you can tell because it feels easy. Like when something is meant to happen, there's an element of flow and the next step revealing itself, or someone giving a recommendation, or the idea creating a sense of urgency within you that allows for flow. It doesn't mean that it won't include effort, but there is an element of, oh, something that previously felt so daunting or I couldn't get it to click, just it feels easy now. Like using my mentorship program as an example, this has been on my mind to create since probably last year, but I don't know, the timing wasn't meant to be last year, apparently, because it just felt very overwhelming. And I kind of had the idea circulating in my head, but I definitely wanted to make sure I did it right. And everything about it, even though it felt aligned on a macro level, the micro execution of it felt blocked. And I think when that happens, when there's something that on a macro level does excite us and light us up, but then the actual execution of that feels on the micro level just not joyful, not easy, like you're drained and you can't work yourself up to do it, then don't try to push it or force it because we can't create something or bring life to something in those conditions. And so when we have these ideas planted into our heads, but it's feeling clunky, it kind of reminds me of Claire and I's discussion on the August listener question episode about how for years she knew she wanted to make TikToks, but then it felt kind of like, she didn't know her voice in the space yet and it wasn't lighting her up and she just wasn't excited about it. And then boom, a few years down the road, she has like viral TikTok after viral TikTok. So it's this macro thing that she knew resonated with her, but on the micro, it wasn't. And so when we allow for spaciousness along the path of these things to come about, how and when we're ready for them, sometimes the timing works out that way because we have to create more space in our life for that thing to come through. Sometimes the timing works out that way so that we are the version of self that's ready to birth this thing into the world. Sometimes the path just takes twists and turns for what we're calling in or what that macro idea is to actually come about. So when things feel like, wow, that story wrote itself, or one thing led to another, or I feel so in flow, or something that I used to grapple with feels easy now, that's a surefire sign that the timing is right too. And sometimes we so want the timing to be right for something, but it just feels so clunky. And instead of hitting our head against a wall repeatedly, trying to force it or push it, know that later down the line, if you just surrender to exactly what the lesson, healing, message, or path is taking you to here and now, there will be a future version of yourself that will revisit this exact thing and it will feel easier for you. And that's how you'll know it's time for it. So that was just a really interesting message that came through. And I think it can be really a helpful reminder that sometimes, like, we have everything on our side and it's just not the right time for one reason or another. And there isn't really a point to battling that. Everything in my life has like really taught me the deepest level of surrender. I wrote here in my note that the feeling I get of trying to push or grasp or control or manufacture expansion is the equivalent of energetic nails on a chalkboard to me. It's like, it just feels out of resonance. It's not exactly right. We can feel it's not exactly right. I thought that was like a funny little phrase that popped into my head, energetic nails on a chalkboard. So going into the angel messages for the week, I know that we are now entering Libra season. And as I was tuning into the energy, I saw the Libra symbol in shadow. And Libra is the sign for love, balance, relationships, even justice and peace. And so, as I was seeing the Libra symbol in shadow, it then took me to my throat chakra, specifically the right side, feeling a collective block. Throat chakra is so important because it rules truth. It's also the energy center that's in between our head and our heart. And it's a really important place for us to express and talk and be radically honest, not just with other people, but with ourselves too. And so the message that I got is there can be no balance without truth, without being so radically honest with ourselves about what's working, what isn't, what is energetic nails on a chalkboard, what's feeling more in flow. There's this really important energy of checking in right now and being really real with yourself. And so then it led me to this really interesting part of the message. So the right side of any like energy center block in my language with my guides is basically the side of letting go and release. And so they were showing me that every single energy center needs to be in balance. And Libra, the scales, is the sign of coming back into balance and equilibrium. And that a lot of people, their throat chakras are out of balance. And the right side out of balance made me feel like telling the same old story over and over again, co creating with ideas, memories, or perceptions about the world instead of curiously exploring, having new experiences, being open to like more kind or positive words. There needs to be more balance with the stories we're telling ourselves about the world, what's possible, who we are. And so that was really interesting to me. It's like every single energy center has the scales within it. And for a lot of us, the right side of feeling blocked is where we're holding on to things from the past and it's not allowing for new truth, new reality, new experiences. And our beliefs really co create with what our reality is. And when we're telling ourselves the same out of date story over and over again, it creates our reality on a deep level because we're believing it to be true and then we see it. So there's just these themes of like old stories versus new experiences. Only like, say, for example, you're in the dating world and your story is like every time you meet a new person and they ask you, like, how's dating going? Or every time you catch up with your friends, it's like, there's no good men. This is what happened in my last relationship. And then everybody's on that same wavelength. Yeah. And then this is what happened. And don't get me wrong, I love a good vent sesh. And I'm not saying to spiritually bypass, but I've said this before on the pod. Where are we co creating with these beliefs or stories or experiences past their expiration date, past the point that they serve us on our path of growth and excavation? And instead, our ego is taking it in as an identity, as a story of self, and it creates an uncomfortable comfort zone. So just notice the way that you're talking about yourself, your creativity, your job, your partnership, like whatever it is. Are you talking about it to yourself and others in a balanced way? If your inner villain voice is always on loud, criticizing you and going on and on about how you're not good enough, or by this age you should already have XYZ done, are you also balancing it with kindness and looking at what is going well in your life and what you are really good at. We have such a negativity bias as a part of our safety and survival and evolution is to like always look for threats and danger. And I think it's majorly causing imbalances to our energy centers. And we have to, especially at this check-in point of equal points of light and darkness, it's a really powerful time to be like, okay, am I in balance with the stories that I'm telling? And actively focusing on keeping equilibrium, because the other way isn't good either. Just constantly focusing on everything that you're amazing at and always being so love and light all the time, then there's more of an emphasis on needing to get real and coming to this shadow and feeling those shame things or whatever it is. So just that balance. But I feel massively like we're on the side of negativity and doom and gloom and intensity. And it feels really important to just watch where we're co-creating with that and in ways that drains our energy and keeps us feeling stuck and zapped and cynical. And so that brings me to the Aries Libra polarity that feels really important right now, because Aries is the sister sign of Libra. And when we talk about an imbalance with any zodiac sign, we can find the answer in the sister sign. And so, this feeling of needing to balance the scales and equilibrium, a lot of that feels to me like holding on to the past. And the sister sign of Libra is Aries, and Aries follows its gut instinct. It takes aligned action and it's very present. It's the first sign of the zodiac wheel, and it's like basically that fool energy in the tarot where it sees the cliff and it jumps off and it takes a leap of faith, and it just follows its impulses in a way that's less sort of weighing both sides and analytical and thinking about previous experiences and staying caught up in the story of things. Aries like cuts all the way through that and initiates with exactly what their heart is now. And there was this message here of part of balancing the scales of the throat chakra is saying yes to joy, saying yes to what is pulling you here and now, being present, taking aligned action, being brave, really leaning into that Aries energy to find that balance. And with that, I saw butterfly as an animal guide around the week, and I just started getting this feeling of momentum and expansion and quietly growing into even deeper levels of our power. And I got the message that this is the moment real change starts. For a lot of you, I feel this sense of like you've been doing so much work and putting so much in. And I feel this magical, like tingle of energy in the air as I was tuning into this week. And it's like, this is where the real change starts. And I'm sure it's no accident that I felt called to talk about when it's the time for things, it starts to feel more easy, or you start to feel more optimistic about it, or it starts to feel more achievable. And that's the timing is right for it. So there's a lot of things coming up that are layering in really beautiful ways. And I feel like this season and going into the fall, it's like there's something very electric about the energy, and it has massive potential for like growth and magic and change and just so much up level. Another pattern that I see as part of this Libra shadow or feeling out of balance that comes back to that sister sign of Aries energy is a lot of people, and I see this all the time in my readings too, will feel very stuck and blocked. And then their angels give them a message and it resonates with them, like, take this class, read this book, go for a walk, dust off your drum set and get back to it, whatever it is. And then instead of actually acting on the message, they start to get in their head about, well, what does that mean? And is it really worth it? And the imposter syndrome comes up. And then it's like, can I even make money from doing that thing if it's about that? Like, there's just ways that we are so indoctrinated into productivity and linear thinking and survival mode. And I understand it's part of the times and living in this world that doesn't feel safe on a lot of levels for a lot of people. And that is 100% valid. But it's not a reason to stay stunted or stuck or in a life that doesn't light you up. So there's a feeling here of your angels purposely leading you down paths that are a little bit windy or roundabout as a way to get you to trust your own intuition and your own impulses and to really listen to that. It goes back to that message of following your joy, saying yes to joy. And there's this feeling too of like when you follow your instincts, that Aries energy of just acting purely on instinct without overthinking. I feel like that's also a way to keep the scales balanced because your instinct is leading you to what you need in the present moment. And it doesn't mean Aries is like all perfect and Libra is all difficult. I'm talking about a shadow side of Libra that Aries has medicine for. And then Libra has medicine for Aries. But the first 6 signs are the recipe for healthy embodiment of the second 6. And I feel like there's a little need for that warrior bravery, saying yes to joy, and following instincts in this moment. Create momentum for your angels to work with, follow your instincts, and it might reward you or lead you in unexpected ways that are more beautiful than you could have planned for yourself. But definitely really big, beautiful expansion that I feel. So the key words to help balance the scales in alignment with Aries energy that I wrote down too are presence, like being really present here and now. Is that throat chakra block holding on to old narratives, keeping you talking about the past instead of actually creating with who you are here and now and letting yourself grow and expand and write a new story based off of this version of self? Simplicity, not overcomplicating it, saying yes to whatever instinct is coming up for you and trusting that, not doubting your intuition. And then action, taking aligned action, making a new choice, starting to write new stories that are exciting and reflective of the potential and magic in the world. I even find that sometimes, like, I've talked about this on the podcast before too, how I did a no complaining for 40 days challenge. And that it was so interesting because when I didn't complain for 40 days, you can feel the vibe of people who just want to vent and commiserate and complain. And while I understand that on a deep level, especially because I was a waitress for many years, and that's all I did with my coworkers was like complain about the tables and what was going on, complaining doesn't change anything. It keeps you in the vibe of what isn't working instead of taking that information and being like, okay, well, what's in my power to change and what isn't? And that kind of like complaining and old stories and negativity biases, it's an energy leak. And I think in a moment of such intense collective energy, it's really important for us to be aware of our energy leaks so that we can be as energized, present, and solution oriented as possible here and now, which is more of what we need. So, going into the mediumship for the week, I had such a beautiful spirit person coming through. She felt more like a spirit guide than somebody that would have actually been recognized as an ancestor, but maybe someone here would recognize her. I just immediately saw a witch's hat on her head. I saw a long braid. I saw her working with plants. I got an E name connected to her, and I felt like she would have been born around like the early 1700s, is what I want to say. I also felt such a gentle, peaceful energy from her. I felt like she was a midwife. I felt like she preferred to be alone and just in nature and preferred to be in her own company. And I got the feeling that she's a spirit guide that's very active with working with people who are on the path of the healer, who are healer energy. So that doesn't have to just be like an energy healer. It's also like nurses. And I got this feeling with her of a lot of people within the healthcare system, and like the consciousness is kind of shifting there and that she's very passionate about that. So she felt like she worked in a lot of healing spaces. And it was interesting because she showed me that she was one of the people like accused of witchcraft, and that basically she was assisting in the birth of a really important noble boy that was being born, and the baby didn't make it, and they blamed her and blamed her as a witch. And she gave me this feeling of such sadness, and her message today was, a big part of the collective witch wound, like we have the individual witch wound, and then there's a collective witch wound. And part of the collective witch wound that isn't spoken about a lot is how disconnected we are from sticking our neck out to help each other, for showing up and caring for each other, for sticking up for each other, for being brave and doing what's right, even if it feels scary or like it puts us in danger. And she was saying that this part of the witch wound and this inability of us to stick up for each other and stick our necks out for each other is responsible for the slow death of the planet. That sounds very dramatic, but it's very intense because she's giving me this feeling that it allows patriarchy to keep us divided when we listen to the witch wound. And I know that so much of the witch trials was like, you know, sister turning on sister, never knowing who you can trust and who you can't. And there's been such a disconnection in the past before all of these centuries of sanitizing out our magic and, you know, making us afraid. There was a greater sense of justice. And it's very interesting that this is coming up for Libra season 2. I'm just making this connection because Libra is like fairness, peace, and justice. And I feel like there is such an imbalance of that on a deep level because it's up to us to be the ones to bring justice. Like our systems are so corrupt these days. And there's a sense of us really needing to be able to have each other's backs and that it's in our truest, deepest, most healed nature to stick our necks out for each other, to be there for each other, to stand up against what we know in our heart is wrong. And it's our nature to care. It is our nature to care so deeply. And the witch wound tells us it is not safe to care. It is not safe to be a voice for that person. It is not safe to stick your neck out in any way. Just put your head down and fawn. And we have all been there. And this spirit person's message is touching me so deeply too, because I recognize part of that witch wound within myself. And that's the thing about the witch wound, is a constant unraveling. But the powers that be and the patriarchal forces through millennia of conditioning really taught us it is not safe to be powerful. It is not safe to use your voice. It is not safe to be spiritually other. It is not safe to be your authentic, powerful self. And it is not safe to care, to use your voice for other people. It is not safe to stick your neck out. So that was a really interesting part of the witch wound that I haven't given much thought to, but made complete sense when she brought it up. And it feels like when we band together, that is our true nature. And that's what swings the pendulum, speaking about equilibrium and balance, away from individualism and aggression and separation, which makes it easier for the powers that be to get away with things. And when we unite, and I see people doing this already in such beautiful and inspiring ways. And when we do that, we are literally healing the collective witch wound and taking our power back as a collective, taking our voice back as a collective, stepping into our magic as a collective. And that feels like medicine that is so needed in a deep way. So I just found this spirit person to be so beautiful with such a powerful message, and just something to think about how these collective times might be triggering our witch wound and how we can make a more caring choice that honors the truth of who we really are on a soul level. So I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your week, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Magic Hour podcast. We are so happy you're here. I absolutely love to connect with you all on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. I love to get your thoughts on each episode, and I get so excited to get your emails to contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss a new episode in your inbox. We have so many amazing guests right around the corner as always. always, please make sure to send your 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll enter you into an angel reading giveaway with me, which is just my favorite thing, to get to connect with the hummingbird community in that way. You get a bonus entry if you also send a screenshot of your YouTube subscription, and also a screenshot of sharing us on your story and tagging us at Magic Hour Podcast on Instagram. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 288 5-star reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We so appreciate you sharing the podcast with other magical people, and it really helps us keep this project alive. To learn more about me, my work, to book a reading with me, take a workshop, please visit angelsandamethyst.com. And remember, you are magic.